Everybody, and welcome back. My name is Kari, and today I am doing Don't Mind Whatever is Happening Upstairs, my September wrap-up. It is October. September wrap-up. So, a fair number of these I do not actually own, or have in physical copy at the moment. Hence the phone. So the first one is Half a King by Joe Abercrombie, which was recommended to me by one of the Vikings at the Viking encampment at the Minnesota Renaissance Festival. I may have spent like half of my time at Renfest at the Viking encampment. They are amazing, they're a fantastic group of knowledgeable nerds, and I adore them, all of them. So, books may have been mentioned, and Frodo the Lost Speaker recommended Half a King by Joe Abercrombie to me. So I read it, as one does. I gave this one 3 stars. It's very clearly YA, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's not necessarily the age range I tend towards anymore, or I guess more specifically, it depends on how it's written. This one was definitely written for a teenage boy. Again, nothing wrong with that, it's just that I've never been that and I didn't really care. So I did enjoy it, I thought it was fun, I thought it was adventurous, but there was nothing really to sink my teeth into. Then I read the Red Address book by Sophia Lundberg for my book club. For this one I gave it 3.5 stars. It is about a Swedish woman who is, it's translated from Swedish, about a Swedish woman who's in her 80s and going through her address book and writing down all of her memories of these people and her life as she lived it. Our book group came to a consensus that while it is a fun read, and it is based on the author's own life, I believe it was her great aunt or something, it was very superficial and unsatisfying. Like, there are mentions of World War II and the Depression and being a model in Paris at the time that are just kind of, oh yeah, you know, life was great, we were models, we had all the money and the cigarettes we wanted. Okay, but we're not gonna mention the Nazis invading or the Jews being taken away. No, okay. So there were a lot of little bits that just felt superficial, and looking back on it, maybe privileged, because she wasn't even acknowledging that there really were problems. It was just sort of what it was, which I get, because you keep living, regardless of what's happening around you, you keep living, that's what happens. But in a book, it always feels like there should be at least some sort of acknowledgement of, you know, shit's going down in a horrible way, particularly with hindsight. But at any rate, it was a fun read, definitely emotional at the end, so I gave it 3.5. Then I read A Prayer for the Crowned Shy by Becky Chambers, and I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. It was fantastic and adorable, and it addresses some really heavy, weighty topics, but in such a wholesome, clean way, if that makes sense. And it's not that there's not language or, you know, talk of sex or anything that society deems dirty in the West. It's more that it's just, she doesn't get bogged down in details, right? So the premise of this is a monk and a robot meet, and they are wandering around a futuristic society together. And the robot will question something that the humans do, or, you know, yeah, that's it. The robot will question something the humans do, and the human, in trying to explain it, will either get tangled up or kind of go, hey, I don't know, but here's my theory, and then she just kind of leaves it at that. And it's glorious because it doesn't get bogged down in the physics, the philosophy, the XYZ of the nitty-gritty, and I absolutely love it. It is also a novella, so it is fairly short, 150 pages I think at most, but I actually really love that series, and that is the second book. Then I read The Happiness Project by Gretchen Rubin, which I also gave 3.5 stars. This is the author's year of happiness, where she takes a year and every month chooses a different theme to make her life more happy. And then in December she does all of those things together. I think it was a very interesting book. There are definitely some issues I had with it, just in that it seemed to be repetitious and maybe a bit dull. But I liked the idea of it, and I could not necessarily connect, but I remember having been told some of the same or similar things by my health coach, Courtney, back when I hired her in 2021. And so that was kind of like, oh, okay, so this is how you could implement that a different way, or oh yeah, I've done that, I should get back into it. That kind of thing, more than it was anything that it will actually stick with me. Then I read Wild and Wicked Things by Francesca May, which is sort of in a roundabout way recommended to me by Abby because she didn't directly recommend it to me, but it was a Goldsboro's SFF book, all of which she has adored thus far, and it was the only one available at my library at the time. And so, being me, I went, yes, need. So I went and got that from the library and read it. I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. Why did I give it a 4 out of 5 stars? Let's go check my review, shall we? It's very lyrical. I enjoyed the setting of the magic system. Enjoyed the romance, sapphic. Definitely a dark book, so please check trigger warnings. Definitely. But woven together well and not fetishized. Not necessarily a new favorite, but one I'd recommend to someone who likes historical fantasy. Okay, so yeah, it's not necessarily the most memorable thing I've ever read, but I loved the Gatsby inspiration, I loved the relationship, I loved watching the characters figure themselves out, and I loved the plot twist that came with it. It was fantastic. Alright, and the rest of them I have physically, and I would apologize for not putting in pictures of the books, but I can't be bothered. So, first one was one that I finished for my August month, which was themed rereads. By the way, my theme for September was Elizabeth I, and we can clearly tell how well that went for me. I did get one in, which we'll talk about in a minute, but look, Renfest. Really, that's all I need to say for September is Renfest, so that's where we're at. Oh, and there's a dog. Hi, River. So yes, Life and Death in Shanghai by Nian Cheng, which I read for August. It was a reread. This is a memoir of her time during Mao Zedong era China from about 1960 to 1989, give or take. Hi. And she, sorry, yeah, don't mind me. She and her husband, are you coming back? She and her husband worked for Shell, and that made them capitalists, and therefore, after her husband died in 1957, she was targeted by Mao Zedong government officials and ended up imprisoned from 1966 to 1973. And then after that, obviously, she is watched and everything else until she is able to get out of the country in 1987? 1989? Late 80s. At any rate, I adore this book. I gave it a 5 out of 5, just like the first time. I think it is beautifully written. I think it is very important. This is probably the basis of my knowledge of modern China. I definitely need to update my knowledge on modern China, and I'm fully aware of that, but this is sort of where I'm at the moment. I absolutely adore this book so much. I think it is beautiful and well written, and it hits hard topics, but without being too much. Then I had a panic moment because I remembered that my friend Chelsea and I were doing a buddy read of Fevered Star, and I was supposed to reread Black Sun before I did that, so I panic read Black Sun again by Rebecca Roanhorse and gave it a 5 out of 5 stars because this book is bloody amazing and I love it. If you haven't read it yet, go read it. Pre-Columbian fantasy with giant crows and politics and neo-pronouns. Just amazing. Please go read it. And if you don't, what are you doing with your life? And then I read Fevered Star by her, which is the sequel, and oh my gosh, it got better. This one does not fall into the problem that a lot of second books do. There's not really any, slump. None of that. It is shorter, not by much, but it is a little bit shorter, but it is still amazing and it packs such a punch, and I am beyond excited to see what the third one has in store. Mind you, we're not gonna get it super soon, which is totally fair. I get taking a book takes a lot of time, but also at the same time, part of me needs it now. But what it does mean is that if you haven't read these two absolutely phenomenal books, you have time to go read them before the third one comes out. So go read them, and then come back and we'll talk. But 5 out of 5 to both of them, in case you couldn't tell. And then, I don't know, God, 6 weeks ago now, I, in the course of my work, realized that I don't know enough about drugs, because as you do, and so I went and got books at the library about opium and methamphetamine. As you do. The first one of which is Milk of Paradise by Lucy Inglis. This is a history of opium, and it was really helpful for some context. I knew opium, and therefore methamphetamine and every other opioid, came from opiate. Opiates are derived from poppy. Opioids are synthetic. Learn that in this book. I also learned that there's an elephant tranquilizer that apparently some people cut methamphetamine or heroin with, and I'm not entirely sure why you would do that, but you know, they cut it with fentanyl too, and that's a whole other thing, so here we are. But anyway, I learned a lot from this book, which was well written and clearly well researched, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. She talks about opium throughout the entirety of the globe, because it didn't just, start and stay in China. It started, we're not really sure where, but there are some pretty early mentions of it, several thousand years BC, in, I want to say, Middle East Africa area. Yes, I realize Africa is a huge continent, but like northern Africa. And then it just sort of goes boom, and then colonization happens, and it just is used as a weapon, and now here we are, and we're doing great. But I believe I gave this 4.5 or 4 stars, because there were bits of it that were dense, but overall I really enjoyed it, and I did learn a lot. And then, the last book I read was Elizabeth's Spymaster by Robert Hutchinson. Hutchison, there's an N. Here's 2 N's. This is about Francis Walsingham, who was Elizabeth's spymaster for 30 plus years. And I give this one a 4 stars, a pretty solid 4 stars. I think it was well written, definitely a bit dense, but once you got into the swing of things, it was fine. My biggest problem with this was that it focused very much on the crises in Elizabeth's reign, so Mary Queen of Scots, Spanish Armada, Catholics, that kind of thing, as opposed to just doing more of what I expected, which was an overview, with maybe a little bit more in certain chapters on Mary Queen of Scots or the Armada. Because the subtitle says The Secret War That Saved England, but here's the thing, she was fighting the Catholics for almost her entire reign, explicitly. So I don't really understand how it's a secret war, unless we're just referring to the fact that he was a spymaster. I don't know. That wasn't entirely clear, but I did really enjoy it. It was a side of Elizabethan England I haven't seen before. I've obviously read about Walsingham in the sense of like, oh yeah, Elizabeth met Walsingham this day and he did this, but I've never gotten into any sort of detailed account, and this was a more of a detailed account, so I enjoyed that. But those are the books I read in September. I did read 10, which I am not mad about, and I'm hoping I can get to more in October. Theoretically, yes, because I'm not going to Renfest in October, because it's, over, which is very sad. It always makes me sad to leave Renfest on the last day. I'm already plotting on how to go more next year. What that says about me, I don't know, but we're not going to address that right now. What we are going to do is say those are the 10 books I read in September. I hope you enjoyed. If you have any comments, questions, let me know in the comments down below, which is, where comments should go by default. But anyway, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.